These are images of racial and ethnic discrimination in the world today. Unfortunately, racism is not a thing of the past. Racism is laws, employment practices, and government decisions that can keep a child from eating, force a woman into slavery, and push a family off of their land.
Sometimes it's rough out there.
In the summer of 2001, people from all over the world came to fight for justice in Durban, South Africa, at the largest United Nations World Conference against racism, racial discrimination, xenophobia, and related intolerance.
Of the city, isolation is a riddle. To be surrounded by a million other people.
Delegates from 170 countries met to draft the official declaration and program of action. In addition, thousands of individuals and groups attended the forum for non-governmental organizations.
We are starting something here in Durban. Durban is a conference essentially about relationships, about exactly how we relate to each other, neighbor to neighbor, community to community, nation to nation. And we have not got it right in the previous centuries. The Universal Declaration on Human Rights in Article 1 proclaims that we are all equal in dignity and rights. The issues are so important. Every country should be here in Durban to participate. Every country that cares about these issues must be here to participate in the discussion.
The goals of the conference focused on identifying common forms of racism and providing participants with a plan to eliminate discrimination worldwide. The work at the conference was not easy. The United States left early in protest over disagreements about language in the document, and the hard work done at Durban was temporarily drowned out by the tragic events of September 11th. But the voices from the conference will not be forgotten. The final declaration sets new standards for human rights and requires that nations follow up with action. Using the work of filmmakers from around the world, we're going to show you 7 examples of racial and ethnic discrimination and tell you how governments agreed to address these issues at Durban. Indigenous peoples are the original inhabitants of a region and were some of the first victims of racism. In the Americas, Australia, New Zealand, Asia, and Africa, Native peoples have been forced off their land, experienced genocide, and made to abandon their culture. Many indigenous groups have had their land stripped of resources, leaving them without a steady means of livelihood.
There are multinational corporations that we never heard of that are coming in and raping our lands. The only time that they want to talk to us is when they want our waters, they want our trees, they want our oil, and then once they get everything, we're left with nothing.
We see now many lives being affected in the animal, birds, human beings from pollution that's developing all around us now. There are evidence of babies born deformed, they're blind, and some of them eyes diseases, lung diseases are developing, cancers developing more and more because of these pollutions.
The final Durban Declaration calls on states to protect indigenous rights and cultures and to increase access to economic resources. The caste system is an old Hindu structure that decides a person's place in society by his or her birth. Members of the lowest caste have been called untouchables, but refer to themselves as Dalits, meaning broken to pieces. Some 160 million people in India are Dalits. Dalits may not live in the same areas, use the same wells, visit the same temples, or drink from the same cups as the higher castes. They are also forced to clean up after the higher castes. Dalits are often physically abused and even murdered. Dalit women often bear the brunt of these attacks. Although laws do exist banning discrimination against Dalits, they are rarely enforced. In Durban, caste-based discrimination was not added to the final UN declaration because of resistance by the Indian government. But thousands of Dalits and their supporters exposed this form of hidden apartheid. A key issue that emerged in Durban was the question of self-determination. Tibetans in Durban protested the Chinese occupation of their land. Roma people, formerly called Gypsies, from Eastern Europe, shared stories of being expelled from country after country. Palestinians came to gain support for an independent state. Palestinians have not had a state of their own for over 50 years and live in constant occupation. Special laws force Palestinians to carry identity cards, pass through border checkpoints, travel on unpaved roads, and stay home under curfew, while Israelis travel freely. Palestinians often do not have access to clean water or to hospitals, and it's not uncommon for their homes to be demolished, uprooting families. The continuing conflict in the region has caused a tragic loss of life for both Palestinians and Israelis. The final Durban Declaration recognizes the right of the Palestinian people to an independent state. It calls upon states to support security and peace in the region for both Palestinians and Israelis. Racism often plays a role in the lives of immigrants and migrants. These individuals leave their home countries fleeing poverty or repression. They live precariously, many without homes or legal status. 96% of children who work and sleep on the streets are migrants. Immigrants and migrant workers are often paid the lowest wages and work in unsafe conditions. Sweatshops exist in many parts of the world, including a large number in the United States.
Once I came to America, I worked in a factory as a seamstress. There was a lot of pressure in this job. You had to finish the job no matter how long it took you. Even until the middle of the night or overnight, you had to stay and finish the work. In those years, I worked 365 days a year. Many times I worked until 3 a.m. Sometimes I would have to sleep in the factory, and then, in the morning at 8 o'clock, I would wash my face and brush my teeth.
The final Durban Declaration urges states to eliminate racism against migrant workers and to give them full equality. Refugees are particularly vulnerable to racist and ethnic violence. More than 5.5 million fled their homes last year. They were forced to leave because of war or persecution. They often find themselves living in extreme poverty in crowded and unsafe camps. Racism determines not just who is a refugee, but which countries accept refugees and how they are treated. The United States receives less than 1% of the world's refugees. The final Durban Declaration urges states to provide refugees with protection and assistance and to end discrimination against them. Women came to Durban to show the many ways in which they are affected by racism. In many countries, women of color are forced to work in the most difficult occupations and receive the lowest wages for their work. Four million people a year are traded against their will. Among them are millions of women and children who are sold, transported, and forced to work in the sex industry. Many of these women and girls are brought to relatively prosperous countries, such as the United States, where men pay for their sexual services. Trafficked women are often afraid to speak up about their situation for fear of violence or deportation. The final Durban Declaration urges states to enact strict laws against the trafficking of women and to uphold the rights of victims. The transatlantic slave trade lasted in the U.S. for over 200 years, and the devastating effects of slavery are still visible around the world. In the United States, African Americans receive lower wages than white Americans. They receive higher prison sentences than other defendants for the same crime. Despite the official end of segregation, African Americans lack equal access to health care and education. The word reparations comes from the word repair, or to make good, and can help compensate for the devastating effects of slavery.
Our voices are heard all over the world. Our voices are heard right now in Brazil. Our voices are heard all over the continent, and it's important that our voice be heard.
Reparations would allow for investments into institutions dedicated to providing African Americans and African descendants with equal access and opportunity. The final Durban Declaration recognizes slavery and the slave trade as crimes against humanity. It urges states to ensure the rights of victims to seek adequate reparations. Thousands left Durban committed to continuing the struggle for human rights. Yet the global fight against racism needs all of us. No matter how large or small our work seems, we can all contribute to promoting greater human dignity.
Because the streets are alive with the sound of boom, bop. Can I hear it once again? Boom, bop. Tell your neighbor, tell a friend, every box got a right to be booming. Because the streets are alive with the sound of boom, bop. Can I hear it once again? Boom, bop. Tell your neighbor, tell a friend, every flower got a right to be blooming. Be resistant. The negativity, we keep it at a distance. Call for backup and I give you some assistance. Like a lifesaver deep in the ocean. Stay afloat here upon the funky motion. Rock and roll upon the waves of the season. Hold your breath and you're underwater breathing. To be rhyming without a real reason is to claim but not to practice a religion. If television is the drug of the nation, satellite is immaculate reception. Beaming in, they can look and they can listen. So you see, don't believe in the system to legalize you or give you your freedom. You want rights? Ask them, they'll read them. But every flower got a right to be blooming. Stay human, because the streets are alive with the sound of boom, bop. Can I hear it once again? Boom, bop. Tell your neighbor, tell a friend, every box got a right to be boom.